get it just from that newsletter. But it's great to have them here. I think there are a lot of synergies. I remember when you were talking in your 4-week masterclass that you were doing for all the folks who pre-ordered the book, you were talking about eroticism in a way that Esther talks about it, in the sense of like vitality and vibrancy and radiance in everyday life.
I love her work.
Oh, amazing. She is a member of the group. I don't know how much she follows it, but maybe she'll pop in and check out the recording. Hey, everyone. I'm seeing some folks joining. Welcome, guys. I'm here with Kasia Urbaniak. I know this is a much awaited conversation. One thing to note is if you are commenting, and please feel encouraged to, I can't see your name. I just see the comment. I can't see a profile picture or a name. So feel free to share your name if it's relevant or if you want me to know who you are. We'll give folks another second or two to join. I know that there are a lot of people signed up for this conversation. Kasia, any highlights from your day or your week so far?
Highlights. They're all like the Bizarro reel from the Twilight Zone. I think it's kind of the nature of these times, though. It's like everything that's supposed to work doesn't, and then things that aren't supposed to work suddenly do.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
Like Alice in Wonderland time, like we're all in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, 100%. This past, I guess, year now, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Are you in New York City?
No, I'm not. I actually, a year and 2 days ago, went on vacation in Hawaii for a few weeks with my friend.
Okay.
And then the quarantine happened, and I'm still here a year later.
Oh my God, that's so funny. How is it there in terms of the virus? Is it pretty minimal?
I'm on an island with 0 cases right now.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. I'm a little bit jealous. I'm in Chicago, so it's a very different story. Yeah. But I feel like kind of collectively we're coming to the end of this hopefully soon. So
yes.
Yes. Welcome everyone. I see some more folks joining. For anyone who just joined, welcome. I know we have a lot of new folks in the group because of this conversation. So welcome to our safe, inclusive, curious community. Feel free to comment during the chat if you're inspired to. Let us know where you're tuning in from or anything on your mind. I don't know if we'll be able to take live questions, just kind of depending on the time, but feel free to throw them in the chat if you're inspired to. And if you're not able to catch it live, we'll have a replay option available in the group as well. So let's dive in. Welcome, everyone.
So, hi, and you'll have to excuse me because the only way I know how to turn on the do not disturb is with Siri. So
do it.
Hold on 1 second.
That's Siri involved. Okay, we're all set?
We're all set.
Okay, amazing. Hey, everyone. So I'm here with Kasia Urbaniak. Kasia, I can't even remember where I first came across your work. It was in November of this past year. Maybe it was like a suggested YouTube video after I watched something else. But I learned about you and was just so drawn to your work and your message. You just this week came out with a new book.
That's right.
Unbound. I bought a couple copies for friends for their birthdays coming up. I'm an audiobook person, so I got my version on audiobook, but I got hardcover copies for friends. So I'm always curious, like with the book writing process, I feel like it's a journey in itself. And I'm curious, what came up for you in writing this book?
You know, a lot like, I almost feel like it's a magical, kind of paradoxical, karmic land of Hall of Mirrors situation where both starting the school and writing the book were similar in the sense that everything I was trying to do, I ended up being confronted by.
Oh, of course.
So like the book writing process, I mean, you could say it took, 2 years, you could say it took 5 years. You mentioned the thing about Esther's take on eroticism as being linked to vitality. One of the things that helped me was returning to that even in the vocal booth of recording the audiobook. Like every step of the way, the work of the Academy on asking, on legitimacy, on owning it, on not worrying about asking for the 35th correction, the arguments about the cover and how it should look, all of it was like, I'd have to go back to the book I was writing and be like, oh, this is how I do it.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I just bought my first home, and I feel like this home has been a really great teacher and mirror to me as well. Just all of the decisions that come up and, the negotiating credits with the sellers, and even just like the design process, and just kind of making the drain of making decisions, and kind of this balance between like just being okay with stuff and like creating like this beautiful, magnificent space for yourself. I feel like my home has been one of my biggest teachers for myself this year.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so you talked a little bit about kind of what came up for you in the book writing process. And I'm curious specifically, like what good girl conditioning came up for you? And maybe for anyone who's unfamiliar with that term, since it's such a foundation and kind of like cornerstone of your book, if you can kind of explain it in your own words.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to acknowledge that this is a discussion group around Esther Perel's work, right? One of the things I love about her work is that you can feel, taste, touch, and see that although she's incredibly intellectual and incredibly smart, and there's a very strong mind component, you can feel, see, taste, touch, and understand that everything comes out of practice. Mm-hmm. Practice. And when the Academy got started, I had 1,000 ideas about good girl conditioning, about what was going to work, about asking, about negotiation, and I had to throw them all out the window. What ended up winning out were the things that showed up in the room that worked. Yeah. So, good girl conditioning is a concept that, mentally is kind of easy to understand in the sense that you take a look at the arc of human history, and that women have had some kind of rights for maybe 50, maybe 100 years, maybe 20, depending on how you define it, right? And even if you are generous and say like 150 years, like super generous, that's really an eye blink, right? Most women will have grandparents who were raised in a very, very different world when it comes to gender, if not parents, right?
Yeah.
So if you have an entire cultural history that's bent on a woman being able to thrive, succeed, survive in society based on basically one factor: how marriageable she is, how high up the social ladder she can marry, can she find a partner that will do all the stuff, that will make it possible for her to express her dreams. What you have is the fabric of social behavior and social conditioning being around a woman being marriageable. What are the qualities in the patriarchy that would make a woman marriageable? Low maintenance, accommodating, harmonizing, putting other people first, never looking better than everyone else, but also not falling behind, right? Being incredibly resourceful, not asking for things, but making the best use of what she has. And 100%. Suddenly you have this kind of like, oh yeah, that's a really antiquated idea, but you see our current predicament and women's behavior, and not even women's behavior, in our own unconscious bodily tendencies still move in the space of either wanting to be all those things or an exact rejection of those things. I'm not going to ask permission. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to receive. I do it all myself. Screw that. Like I'm totally independent, and then being really exhausted, tired, alone, isolated, doing the job of 20 people, getting, a 20th of the credit. Either way, this good girl conditioning can be addressed in the present moment, in our present culture, in a way that speaks to an individual woman's experience as related to our cultural history, instead of talking just about, which is very important, but like sexism, right? Like there's something we can do to break out of this thing that was passed on to us by our foremothers and forefathers. So that's a kind of a long definition of good girl conditioning, but it lives in the body. And we teach it to each other. And the whole book Unbound is about breaking out of it in the body, in the mind, and in the emotional field without waiting for the world to change.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why I thought of this, maybe kind of because of how you set the stage, but my grandparents on my mom's side were Holocaust survivors. And so I think my mom really received not just like the good girl conditioning, but like the fear and the fear and the scarcity that came with that. So yes, like women have the good girl conditioning, but if you're in a family that has experienced trauma or racism or other challenges, then that's layered on top of the good girl conditioning as well.
There have been these great studies recently about epigenetic trauma, like trauma being genetically, right? Like so the people who argue like women are free now, there's no reason why we should have any kind of conditioning from the past, don't understand. Actually, Holocaust survivors were the core of this study. That they found that there was a genetic impact on children of Holocaust survivors that had never had that trauma, but it was genetically affected. Certain gene sequences were like turned on or off in accordance with the trauma pattern.
Yeah, I believe that. I feel like there's like the embodied trauma that you're probably not even conscious of. And then there's like the conscious messages that you got because of the trauma as well. So,
that's true. And it becomes a vicious cycle. But you know what? Here's the core of what's really important for me to say. What I really, really, really want to say is, I have this path, this kind of like unique conjunction between studying to be a dominatrix and training to be a Daoist nun that made me really sensitive in the space of studying power dynamics, like really, 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 really subtle and sensitive. And what I saw was a huge missing piece in how we understand power, connection, power dynamics, and this architecture of power, right? The thing that I want to say more than anything else is when it's going well, when it's going perfectly well, when we are in our natural state of sharing attention and sharing power and taking turns being on top and taking turns receiving and being in the surrendered submissive state, when it's working and singing and working particularly well, that's when we don't notice it. And when it starts falling apart, it's usually to the detriment, though not always, of whoever has a lower status in society, like women's conditioning in particular. But when it fails both parties. And then we have 1,000 explanations for why it's happening, and not the one that has to do with attention, not the one that has to do with the architecture of how this works. So another Esther Perel thing that I think is brilliant is it doesn't matter what your partner says to you. If you're in a romantic relationship, it doesn't matter what your partner says to you. And I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly. If you don't think that your partner cares and is like existing for your best interests or like cares about your well-being, anything they say will be interpreted or can be interpreted as an attack. This noticing points to the conversation under the conversation. That's always the most important thing there is. So like, how do you transmit the information? I care about you. Therefore, when I say one of us should take out the trash, it's not an attack. How do I transmit that? By paying attention to you. Where is the weight of attention? By seamlessly shifting that attention back and forth. When I'm talking about myself, I'm talking about my experience, my attention's on myself. If my attention's on you, what ends up happening is the energetic construction of victimhood. And vice versa. So anyway, I'm getting into the mechanics of it, but when it's working, it's the best fuck you've ever had. The back and forth, it's the best conversation you've ever had. That's when the power dynamic, the fluid switching is happening. It's the brainstorming session that's generating phenomenal ideas where you don't even remember whose ideas was whose anymore. You can't even log the IP rights because you're just so connected and moving in the dance. So, the point is that despite conditioning, our natural state, you see how children shift roles, flip attention. You know, 1 minute you're a magician, 1 minute you're the enemy, then you go from the villain to the hero. It doesn't matter. All of a sudden I have an invisible shield that protects me from bullets. Like, reality doesn't get in the way of the energetic need of the dynamic. And it's beautiful to watch. It's just phenomenal. It's where the magic of human synergy comes in.
Yeah. I thought of like a great improv show, or like a great like jazz improv trio. Just kind of that magic that happens with the spontaneity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Take a dose of that these days with how communication is so dangerous. Like, what's going on in the world? Like, what? Yeah.
It's funny. I don't know why I thought of this when you just shared what you did. But I was a huge Governor Andrew Cuomo fan. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all. You're like kind of nodding a little bit. Okay. So during the pandemic, he was in the spotlight for kind of like really taking control in New York City. And I was like just really turned on by him. And I think a lot of people were. You couldn't listen to an interview, whether it was like Chelsea Handler or Jada Pinkett Smith, like talking about like, don't bother me during Andrew Cuomo's press briefing every day, and he had every eligible woman interested in his status, et cetera. And then I think just this month, really bad allegations have come out around sexual harassment. And like, there's a new one coming out every day. And it just struck me. I was just like so disgusted when I heard this news, because he's someone with obviously a tremendous amount of power and sex appeal. And yet he's, if the allegations are correct, choosing to prey on people who don't have power. And I was just curious to get your perspective. What makes someone who's seen as very sexually attractive and very like, quote unquote, eligible bachelor, what went wrong in the whole power dynamic that they chose to take advantage of these situations?
There's issues that come up for me immediately. And one of them is the way we pay attention to and how we talk about people who do great things, do terrible things, how we kind of like publicly decide and change our minds about what behavior is acceptable, what behavior can be talked about, what behavior can't be talked about. So like, let's leave that for aside for a moment. I can't speak to Cuomo at all, right? And there is kind of a required level of nuance that we're culturally not ready to get into. We're very quick to conflate a person's horrible or potential criminally illegal behavior with who they are. Mm-hmm. Like, you know how in a relationship they'll say punish the behavior, not the person.
Right.
We're nowhere near that, and I understand why. Like I was alive and awake and a teacher during Me Too. I get it. So not Cuomo, but I know that there are many men who have had the experience of being told their entire lives to shut it down, don't have feelings, don't numb out so that you can sacrifice your lives and go to war, so you can fight for us, kill the bear. And then at the same time are also being told, you're numb, you're dumb, you're not picking up the signals, you don't know that you violated someone, you can't see the signs. We have a horrible situation where there's like a lot of men in a position where they have been conditioned not to notice. I'm not talking about the straight up predators and aggressors. I'm not talking about those who've committed crimes or who have, I'm not even talking about the fact that like our shifting values are a good thing, that we care about these things now.
Yeah.
There is something about educating men and not being so quick to murder them. Now, in terms of power dynamics, the reason I mentioned is you asked me about Cuomo is I can't speak to him, but the idea that because he's attractive and sexy, that he would have to use power dynamics in order to get a woman or get something. It has nothing to do with why that happens. It happens because of numbness and like sheer stupidity, or it happens because the pleasure is not in flirting with a woman or getting her. It's in pinning her, violating her, making her feel less than and stupid. So one is like incredibly nefarious and one is incredibly innocent, and we don't have the social skills to separate or to even talk about those things. So everyone's either exonerated and it's boys will be boys, or everyone goes into the bonfire. Right? And it's like we actually need to develop the skills at some point of being able to evaluate these things and think about them.
That makes a ton of sense. I totally get that. And it's a great point too. Let's see. I have so many questions for you. Well, this was kind of a nice segue. You had done an interview on the podcast, The Unmistakable Creative, and you had shared men want to know how to feel more and women want to know how to do more with what they feel. And I'm curious if you can explain that and share where each, meaning men and women, can start.
Yeah. So, that interview was one of my first. It was quite a few years ago. And I would correct it and say men kind of need to feel more.
Okay.
Not want to. Some of them don't, some of them don't know, some of them do, some of them don't. And women want to know what to do with what they feel. It has to do with our opposing conditioning. So it's not even so gender binary. It's more what's asked of us and what's expected of us, right? So this is like a big picture statement, right? If we step back, we're looking at a civilization based on the Judeo-Christian kind of flow of thought.
Right.
Which can really tend towards ignoring the body, disembodiment, rising above the body. That also means rising above emotions, rising above feelings. This whole trend of like hyperproductivity and stoicism. Here are your hacks and how to turn your 8-hour day into a 40-hour day, right? Like produce. This is all to override embodiment. Now, where women sit and where men sit in terms of conditioning is, for better or for worse, we've kept more of our embodiment.
Okay.
We've kept more of our embodiment, right? Women are allowed to have feelings, even though they're diminished and made to feel crazy for having them. I don't know if it's biology or if it's, what it is, but, time and time again, there's more space, even if it knocks a woman down the totem pole, for her to have a more embodied experience. We are all moving in a disembodied direction. That override is not good for men or women. It's quite terrible for men and women. Women are sitting on these signals and gaslit into craziness about being able to feel out that it's time to change a schedule or a commitment or change a deal or like adjust to the seasons, adjust to the moment. All great art, all great sex, all great parties are all about being able to feel the rhythm, feel the moment, feel that, right? And like sense whether a child needs to like not have gluten or whatever. Sense what like this is the movement of the life force. And we are a civilization that's trying to dominate nature, woman, body, all that stuff, all the life force speaking to us, telling us how to guiding us. Now, when it comes to men and women in a heterosexual pairing, what we have is, the thing that's like hard to say, which is we think men are idiots. They think we're angry bitches. We're sitting on all of this information, right? Not understanding why they don't get it. And they're on the other side being like, what's the deal? Like, what's all this about? What's all this chaos? What's all this feeling? What's all this about? Why is such a big deal? Right. Because we're standing on different levels through our conditioning of how embodied and how we engage with what comes up for us in any given moment. Is one of the most important things to understand if we're going to survive as a human race and live in harmony with the life force. And on the individual level, it's exactly how you get unbound, feel more life, understand what to do with the signals, use your empathy as a superpower, not as a curse. Understand where the heat is, where people are coming from, how to move with it, and live your life in accordance with that. There's nothing better. There's nothing better. There's nothing better. There's no amount of success that's joyful when it's bereft of life. There's no formula that leads you to a deader option that can satisfy. There's nothing better than living with the life force and living in accordance with it. And my biggest dream and hope for humanity is that as women decondition from the disembodied programming, we become wilder. We lead the way, and we lead men, and we lead children, and we lead us all through a way of life that is that spontaneous, that's that alive, that's that in honor of what's alive, even if it's like, it's the decisions you made when you bought your house. It's the things you were confronted with when you say your house is your teacher. Mm-hmm. It's how you choose something when logical information doesn't really do the thing to guide you in one direction or another. It's being at the right place at the right time. It's like knowing what someone needs or what you need in a given moment. It's to being in conversation with the universe in a really deep and profound way. And again, I don't think there's anything better.
Kasia, I'm having the biggest chuckle because for anyone who's read your book, there's a whole section on the noisy neighbor.
Yeah.
And that was what led me to buy a house.
That's amazing.
I was having the most horrific experience with a noisy neighbor and an unresponsive management company. And as I was reading your book, I was trying to think back about like the energy that I approached my neighbor with. And it's hard, like when you're sleep deprived and you're pissed off and you're cranky to kind of like bring the finesse that you suggested to the moment. But the good news is it was such a painful experience. I was pretty happy in my old place, and I never would have been in an uncomfortable enough position to move out of it. And this is, I'm in just the most beautiful space, and I could be here for 20 years and be happy as a clam. So maybe it's good that I completely fucked up the how to approach a noisy neighbor and like get what you want, because I love the situation I'm in now. So that's a whole nother kind of lesson.
Well, there's so much I want to say about that. First of all, like it's clear that your house was the most alive next choice. It was more alive than like winning with your neighbor. Also, in that example, I say it's better to tell your neighbor to fuck off and turn that shit down than it is to try to be really nice. And that's where we get into trouble with like trying to get it right. Like the congruence wins when what you're feeling and how you're speaking and where your attention with are aligned. It always turns out better for everyone. Yeah. But it's not a prescription for getting it right or wrong. It's like, you got your house.
100%. Yeah, I think
that's the thing. Life moves in mysterious ways, and we're happier when we know how to follow it.
Agreed. 100%. I was just having such a chuckle with that example.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, just kind of going back to that last quote about men want to feel deeper and women want to act on how they feel. I'm curious if in your sessions as a dominatrix, there were any moments where like men were allowed to feel really deeply through that container that you created. And then as a follow-up, I'm curious what stops women from acting on how they feel. I know they're kind of like two different sides of the coin, but just kind of brought up curiosities about both.
First question, every single session I've ever done.
Yeah.
Every single session I've done has been about creating a safe space so that my clients could feel more deeply. And using language and story and instructions to lead them into a place where they can feel even more. Literally, some of the very, basic location tools in the book in terms of like how to track in a conversation how to keep track of what's happening and have influence, came from sessions where I was like, the stereotypical thing, on your knees, head down, right? And then suddenly I noticed there was his sadness there.
Yeah.
So I would say, right, like, you did that quite slowly. You seem quite sad. Sigh. You sighed. Is there grief? Tears, right? Like locating someone step by step. So every single session.
Wow.
Now, when I started training dominatrixes, it was really interesting because a lot of the women who were being trained were quite young. I was quite young. They were quite young. And a lot of them were doing it for money. Some of them were, there's a percentage that are naturals. They love this kind of thing. They were meant for it, destined for it. I wasn't a natural dominatrix at all. Like I had trouble ordering water in a restaurant. Like I didn't want to bother the waiter. Right. When I was training them, I saw the same thing I saw over and over again, which is there's a huge difference between a performance of power where the attention is all on the self.
Yes.
And a demonstration of power where the attention's on the other. And the difference is huge because if I go, I am so powerful, I am mistress of the dark, you are a bad boy, versus if I look and just say simply, you are here. Much softer statement. Totally neutral on paper. You are here. You heard that. I saw you hear that. You are here. Your head is tilted downward. Like that is so much more powerful. So what I saw is the hesitation in shifting the attention outward. We don't, like, men tend to feel more comfortable moving, maybe less so now out of fear, but men tend to feel more comfortable moving into a woman's space. Women tend to feel very uncomfortable with moving into a man's physical space. Giving him the wrong idea, even getting to. So it translates in attention. So we'll even not fully put our attention out on a man. Here's the problem. In the animal kingdom, how you declare yourself as an alpha is not by puffing out your chest. If you look at wolf packs, if you look at all of these organizations on the most basic level, the alpha is the one that has their attention out. All of the submissives are the ones that have their attention on themselves to see if they're following, if they're getting it, right? Like getting the instructions. So women on a basic attention level will tend towards incomplete outward attention. Just enough outward attention to see if they're in trouble, if they're wearing the right dress at the cocktail party, just enough to see if anybody needs anything, just enough to see if what's happening, like a vigilance, but not enough to shift into a dominant state. Because in the dominant state, your attention is landed so fully on the other that they feel it. They shift into a self-aware, surrendered state. And so, in the dungeon, I saw this over and over and over again. Then when I became a teacher, I saw this with like women in a meeting syndrome. A woman is not owning a room because she's been conditioned to not put her attention and wrap it all the way around everybody there. She says a great idea and somehow nobody really hears it until a guy states it. Yeah, it's sexism, but it's also energetics. He's been taught his entire life to stick his energetic penis out, and she's been, watching herself. Being like, okay, I'm here and I'm in charge, right? But the attention is not fully out. And it makes, just on the primal animal body level, it makes all the difference. It's like, do you trust that you are well held? And everybody knows how to do the dominant state of attention, and everybody knows how to do the surrendered state of attention. Not everybody knows what it is. Not everybody can do it on call. But forgive the stereotype, but watch a mom figure out what's going wrong with her kid. Like watch a mom's, she's got that kid held, right? Even if it's for just a minute, right? And like how many of us are driven crazy by moms who in the moment of mothering have their intention inward, even though they're speaking about you. It's like the victim mom that isn't there, right? That isn't really, you don't feel well held by. So, business, sex, friendship, partnership, creative pursuits, or making an ask. Understanding attention dynamics makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. And you move from something transactional to something synergetic, where both people get something get more out than they've put in.
Yeah. I had a total aha moment when you were talking about training the young dominatrixes. So I'm a pole dancer. I dance almost every day. And at the studio, there are a lot of kind of like the up and coming newbie instructors, and they're wearing like zero clothing and they have these like model bodies. And there's the owner of the studio. I think she started it maybe like a decade ago. We all call her Dee Dee. And Dee Dee will show up. She has like a very kind of like nondescript body, like, you know, body of someone you'd see on the street. And she usually wears like sweats and like a hoodie. And I feel so held in her presence. It's like she knows exactly why each person is there. This person is there because they're a mom and they're trying to like reconnect with their sexuality. This person is like, I don't know, like she's in her 20s and she's like trying to get guys. This person is like a former gymnast and is like trying to connect with her sense of like athleticism, right? This person is just looking for like a fun way to like tune into music and just like be playful and silly. She knows everyone's why. She can see like there are like 15 moving bodies in a room, but she has her eye on every single one. She's like, there's a new person in the back. She's telling her how to do the basics. There's like an advanced student in the front. She's giving her like advanced modifications. She's like cracking jokes, you know. It's just, it's really kind of like hard to put into words, the feeling of being with her, but it's really like nothing else you've experienced. And, you know, you can go into a class with a newbie instructor and like they have the right music and they have the right moves. And I just find myself like looking at the clock and just not being in it. And then I go to one of Dee Dee's classes and it's like euphoric. And so when you describe being held, I'm like, yep, that's it.
That is a phenomenally perfect, accurate, and beautiful example.
Yeah.
So like, so High Priestess Dee Dee is an excellent dom. She knows how to place her attention. We do this exercise at the academy that takes about 5 minutes. 2 women, all the women pair off, and they do this exercise where they practice putting their attention on the other, while the other practices deeply receiving attention. It's done with very neutral language. What happens is after a few minutes, a flow begins where even the most kind of concrete-minded woman starts becoming so deeply intuitive that this woman that she's never met, who she's just describing, she starts to get images and feel psychic about, like starts to get so she can read. This is a few minutes and then they switch. Both women after the exercise feel like they just had a spa day, but also feel like in that 5 minutes, so much deep information was transmitted, not through language, right? Because if I say you have brown hair, like it's such a basic neutral language experience. They practice without Dee Dee's skill, without Dee Dee's magical experience, being like Dee Dee and being held by Dee Dee, right? Because we all have that natural capacity.
Yeah.
And good girl conditioning is what teaches us how not to use it. How not to use it. Because those newbie instructors are probably doing what so many of us have been conditioned to do, to be self-aware, to be confident, being confident, not like using our attention confidently, not regarding others with confidence. It's a huge difference. I love that example. It's such a good one.
Thanks. Is there anyone in your life where you feel super held with them?
Everyone, but it's not, you know, I am around great people, but also I need to be well held every day, many times a day. And I put my attention out so much that receiving attention is very important. And it's not because it's spontaneous, it's because I ask for it. So, like there are 3 people watching this right now, and they already know, like my friends, like my people, they already know that the moment this is over, their job is to spend 10 minutes telling me only what was great, like only what they liked, right? I'll have, I'll ask my partner, I need 10 minutes where you hear me vent. And then afterwards, tell me how cute I looked, or tell me you agree with me, or I need 10 minutes to tell you about this idea that I think is genius. I want you to spend 5 minutes afterwards. And the timing aspect is super important. It's like we're stepping out of the real world and we're creating a magical container where I need you to shoot my idea full of holes. This idea is going to go up against a firing squad. I need you to be the bully, the attacker. I need you to play with me for 5 minutes after I tell you for 10 minutes. And this is something I do every day. And if I didn't, those emotional needs and those relational needs, I just wouldn't have met. I would bounce around in my head between my thoughts and feelings. I wouldn't. So you don't have to be incredibly well loved in order to feel incredibly well held. But to feel incredibly well held is an essential ingredient in being well loved. These are practices and skills that anyone can do.
Yeah. I just had a realization. I don't have people who like kind of the way you've designed your life, what you just described. I don't have that, but maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, I've created daily routines where, for example, I mentioned like the pole example, but I have a fitness community that I'm a part of. And I noticed that I tend to be drawn to instructors where like they just excel at words of affirmation. You're amazing. You're doing awesome. They're challenging, super, super challenging, but also so acknowledging. And so it's like, okay, at noon, I know for an hour, I'm going to have Austin like cheering me on. And, I'll have like 30 other people who are in this virtual fitness community. And, he has like team challenges where we're like, he'll have us like go off camera and just like cheer one person on as they're doing push-ups or something like that, and so I've kind of designed my life where I get these bursts of that, words of affirmation or energetic being held.
This I get passionately angry and fiery in such a delicious way anytime I hear anything in this area of like, you're not supposed to care what people think. I get the idea, right? Give 0 fucks. I get the idea. It's just not real. It's not how human beings are designed. And this push towards sociopathy, we worship sociopaths. We're like, oh, these incredibly wealthy or powerful people devoid of feeling who don't need compliments. Guess what? It's an illness. It's not healthy, right? To want affirmation, to want compliments, to want praise. I understand that not depending on what people think and going your own way is super, super important to fulfilling your destiny and not following the herd and all of that. But every human being needs, and because of the nature of the landscape we live in, women especially need to be seen, praised, adored, worshipped, complimented, affirmed, all of it. And the thing is, it doesn't have to happen by accident. Like you can put yourself in environments where it's part of the structure.
Yeah.
Or you can literally ask for it. You can, like call it what it is, a word bath of love, or like, sometimes it's not, you can hear my rage. I'm just like, it's just not fair because, we have that temporary hit. We hear, give 0 fucks. Don't care what people think. We're like, yeah, I don't care what people think. Lasts about 90 seconds to 90 minutes. And then we're like, oh, there's something wrong with me because I care. Like, I care. I care if I hurt people's feelings. I care. What we need is to move past that and start talking about how to care for oneself, how to care, like what place to put all those things in. Otherwise, just lying and we're rewarding people we're cursing empaths and worshiping sociopaths.
Yeah.
We don't need that in this. We don't need more disembodiment in this world.
No. I'm laughing because I'm kind of sleep deprived this week. I'm the type of person where if I like feel deeply during the day, it will keep me up at night. And I watched the Meghan and Harry Oprah interview. I guess it was on maybe Sunday night or Monday. And I felt just really saddened by the racism that I experienced through. I know people perceived it very differently. So I'm just owning that what I observed was a lot of racism. And, you know, I mentioned my family's history, Holocaust survivors. And so I'm just very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And so I just like slept horribly that night. And then I actually put a post in the group about it the following day. And it led people of color in the group to feel unsafe, which made me feel, again, like just really upset and sad. And, you know, it can be challenging to like feel really deeply. And even if you'd like to be asleep, just the emotions that get stirred up like prevent you from being able to kind of like relax and rest. Do you experience
that ever? No, I mean, you know, I can say so much about that and the interview that you're referring to.
Yeah.
When we feel deeply, and it keeps us up at night, when we feel deeply affected by the news, deeply affected by something that happened, right? When we feel deeply, that's our being not only receiving information and processing it, but generating energy in order to act in accordance. Like we are designed to have an experience and not just think about it and feel it, but, you know, we have, you know, up until very recently, every thought kind of led to an activity. You think about, you know, all the way back, like human beings, you didn't just have feelings and think about things. You had them, so you did stuff. So you feel deeply. And energy is raised for an activity, right? Our bodies were not designed with the internet in mind. Our bodies were not designed with the news media in mind, where you see things and feel things, but feel like you can't do anything in response.
Yeah.
Now you think about that kind of behavior, right? You feel deeply, you see these people, you relate in your own personal history. Why are you awake at night? Why are you feeling deeply? Because something in you is speaking to do something about it.
Yeah.
And like you got to post about it, but we are designed to match the intensity with the action. So an action that matches that intensity would have satisfied you and given you a good night's sleep. Now let's put that to one side. Then there's the activity we do that we call work, that's not motivated by deep feeling, but that we have to kind of whip ourselves into shape and generate the motivation to do.
Yeah.
That's like the production-oriented machine kind of way of being in the world that we're all expected to greater or lesser degrees to do, doing something when you don't feel like it, and then not being able to do something when you deeply feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Which motivational source is better? So if you ask me, right, does that happen to you when you feel deeply and you can't sleep at night? Isn't it hard to feel deeply? No. Yes, but no, because feeling deeply, and of course I've had the luxury of spending the last 20 years of my life designing my life this way, so that what I do and what I feel deeply match.
Yeah.
And match in intensity. So yeah, okay, you know, it's not entirely true. Sometimes I'm absolutely overwhelmed with feeling and need to take some time to figure out how to take this energy and make art out of pain.
Yeah.
Make a message out of the passion. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. The other thing that I think is interesting about the interview that you're referring to is what stood out to me the most is this whole thing that I keep saying about how when it comes to women, we pay attention to how they are. And we pay attention to what men do, not how they are. So like right now, it's like Prince Harry is, you know, trying to protect his partner. But Meghan is what? Is she a liar? Is she a fraud? Is she, you know, like all that? Who is she? And we're kind of missing that the main story here is about him. His being, his feelings. We're ignoring his feelings.
Wow.
He lost his mother. He lost his mother to in the intensity of the press, to criticism. And the entire narrative, in essence, is about he lost his mother, and now he doesn't want the same thing to happen to his partner. But the focus is on her, not on him. Why? Men aren't allowed to have, a deep feeling, and we're criticizing her for who she is when she's tangential to the story, when it's about him. Like, that's where the meat is. That's where the life is. And we're just like, who's she?
Yeah. I just got like full body tingles when you said that, but 100%. Yeah. Okay.
Imagine what that must be like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're a kid, your mom dies in a tunnel because the paparazzi's chasing her. Then you're with a woman and you see the same thing start happening. That's big.
Yeah. Gonna just take a breath. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock. Do you have a hard stop right at the hour, or
no?
Okay. So you had a line in your book, and it goes, well, it wasn't phrased this way, but the phrase "men don't like dominant women," I feel like is kind of shared throughout culture. It's seen as a truth. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. Do men dislike dominant women?
Yeah, no, I mean, that sentence can be taken apart and dismantled on at least 3 different levels. I'm loving this Facebook this line: a boy loses his mother, but we talk about her mental health. That's exactly right. I had to mention it because this comment says it better than I did.
Yeah.
Men don't like dominant women. Okay, first define dominant woman, because if you're in a compressed state, right? That's like, a compressed state is when good girl conditioning is manifesting in your being and your attention, right? You're like trying really hard not to be too much and not too little, not too quiet, not too loud, not too sexy, not too uptight, not too this, right? And you can see this caginess in the body when you get compressed. So if a woman tries to be authoritative, dominant, but she's in this state, it's going to feel bad to her, and to everyone. Right? It's going to feel bad. Oftentimes she's pushed into this state, so it's not her fault, but she's in this state. She sounds bossy, not like the boss, right? It's like the thing we talk about. It's not her fault, but if you're describing that as dominant behavior, then men don't like dominant women. Neither do babies, butterflies, cats, dogs, and neither do women. Neither do we like ourselves in that state. So that's the first dismantling of that sentence. Men don't like dominant women. If it's true dominance, it's different than if it's compressed dominance. If it's compressed dominant through the good girl filter, if it's compressed surrender and submission, yeah, I'm totally fine. It also feels like shit to us and everyone else, including birds, bees, like any creature with a nervous system that can pick up a signal that's warped and Next thing, everybody loves a good dom. Everybody loves a good dom. Dee Dee, your example of a good dom. Everybody loves a good dom. Men, women, children, birds, bees, everyone. Now, aside from that, there's an entire category of men who like only dominant women. And they don't all go to dungeons. A lot of them just marry strong women. Right? So it's bullshit. And the main thing is that all human beings struggle with, or anything with a nervous system struggles with, incongruence.
Right.
So that, we are much more vibe oriented than we know. And it's not that mysterious. It gets a little complicated over Zoom, like attention dynamics. I'm like looking at you, we're doing this interview. It definitely gets more complicated in a virtual space.
Yeah.
But it's not that complicated because we all know how to do it. Because we all know when it feels good and when it feels right is like it's working.
How would you define a good dom, meaning one whose energetics are aligned? How would you put that into words?
A really simple way of putting it into words is if I'm talking to you about you and what you are to do, if I'm giving you instructions, suggestions, making a request of you, but in a dominant form, my attention's on you. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at you now. Oh, and did you understand that? And I'm watching and I'm seeing if the words landed. And I'm catching to see if maybe you misunderstood something or something rubbed you the wrong way. Or if, right, like I'm getting like, that's a good dom. That's like Dee Dee being like, not only do I see that you're here, I see the way in which you are here. I know what you're asking for. I know what your body's asking for. And with just some clean, fully out attention practice, we all start being better body readers without knowing why, without knowing how, without like a book. This gesture means this. Right. This means that person's lying, right? It's just like organic. And women are, I don't know about men because I don't teach men, but women are phenomenally fast at picking this up.
Yeah.
And a good dom also makes really specific asks or gives really specific instructions. It's not like love me more, respect me more, or work harder. It's like, you're going to call me every Thursday morning for 10 minutes and ask me how my day was. You know, like it's like specific. It's like, we're going to have dinners on Fridays. It's going to be date night. You're going to surprise me with a new restaurant each time. I'm going to surprise you with an erotic fantasy each time, written on a piece of paper, like fucking specific. Yeah. So that you know if it happened or not. Like a really easy way to avoid your own energetic sovereignty and authority is to be vague, so that you don't see it when people fail you. You don't see it when people renege. It's not obvious. You don't know if they did it or not. It's a way of hiding. And so a good dom gives really specific instructions. A good dom pays attention, puts her attention out. But you can also get everything you want by being a phenomenal sub, by being phenomenally surrendered. Absolutely unconcerned with how people are going to meet your desires, and be so in love with what you want that you just magnetically make everybody want to fulfill every request you haven't even spoken. And that sometimes can, especially for women who are, you know, growing up in these tumultuous feminist times, can even be more powerful. Like, it's debatable whether one is more powerful than the other, but living in the absolute beauty and enthusiasm of the things that you want and carrying that signal. I use this example because it's so simple. You could really want a hug because you're stressed out. You could want a big grounding bear hug, right? Because you're stressed. And if you're sitting with the stress of how much you want that hug and how shitty you feel, anybody who could be a hugging candidate is going to have to climb over all of those signals in order to give you that hug you need. But if you take a moment to be like, whoa, it would be so awesome to receive a hug, all of a sudden, the chances of somebody, not even knowing why, they decide to come up to you and give you a big bear hug, increase exponentially. You all of a sudden become huggable. All of a sudden, it's like, and that energetic language, that language of just attention. I'm paying attention to myself and the thing that I want. It changes my signal. It changes the approach pattern of people. You're fun to make happy. You're fun to please. You're fun to worship. You're fun to adore. If you can be with, if you're a really good sub, right? If you're like really good at being ready to receive all that you want.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I was thinking about, as you were sharing that, I was thinking about some of the men that I've been most drawn to. And I'm definitely not drawn to like stereotypical macho men. But they share a couple things in common. So when we have a conversation, they'll like remember everything, and then they'll use like little bits to make jokes about in the future. And that's kind of like being held in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Not in a sense, in the sense.
Sense.
They're paying attention.
And I'm not drawn to someone unless they have a great sense of humor. And one of the things that struck me about your book is you talked about how like the manifestation of like mastery of power is playfulness. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that?
Oh yeah. I mean, on a really basic level, when I see students in the academy start to role play really high stakes, difficult conversations with playfulness, they're ready to graduate. It's like when you understand attention dynamics enough, you can afford to have fun. Yeah. Every interaction isn't make or break. You like getting into trouble because you know you can get yourself out. You're not afraid to take risks because you know how to get yourself out should anything go wrong. There isn't so much weight on a single interaction or a single ask. Nothing is that devastating. Everything is negotiable. There's a movement. You're process oriented versus final result oriented, which doesn't mean that it's like all about the journey and not about the results, because I want all women to get what the fuck they want. Like I want them to actually get those things. It's not just like have fun doing it, but when you're having fun doing it, it means that you're willing to experiment and to try. And there's no way to have a meaningful collaboration, relationship, negotiation with anyone if you're not experimenting. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying, if you're trying 19 times to get something to land the 20th time, to make it through those 19 times, if you already know it's going to take 20 times, 20 tries, and you're having fun experimenting, you're an unshakable, influential human being. Like, and once you get the game, once you get that no is not an insult, once you get the beauty of how erotic conflict can be and what comes after, how not breakable relationships are, then a sense of humor and playfulness is native to that. It just comes with it. It's like, we're trying shit, we're going to get somewhere phenomenal.
Yeah.
And women are really, really trained to be absolutely terrified of no. There's this like really, really, really intense thing that happens where energetically we receive the word no like it's to our being, not our request. So we won't even ask or venture into territory where we could, because it's not a rejection of the thing we want. It's a rejection of us. And that it has everything to do with attention dynamics. Like women's being is always front and center.
Yeah. When you were describing that playfulness, I immediately thought of Esther. She embodies that sense of playfulness.
Yeah.
And I also thought of, have you ever seen the movie The Thomas Crown Affair?
I don't remember. That was a while ago. I might have.
You have to see this.
Is that with Catherine Zeta-Jones, or is that a different one?
No, she's been in those types of movies. But this is, there was an original, and then the sequel was with Pierce Brosnan. Mm-hmm. And he loves art, specifically Magritte. And he's an art collector. And there was a famous piece that was stolen, and he's involved in catching the thief, but also possibly being nefarious in other ways without giving away too much. And there's like this amazing erotic tension between, who is the female lead? Someone throw it in the comments. I'm blanking on her name.
Was it like Renee Russo? I'm just like shooting out.
It was Renee Russo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was Renee Russo and Pierce Brosnan. And there was, incredibly high stakes art theft, like one of the biggest paintings in the world. And the two of them together are just so playful, like loving the chase, loving kind of messing with each other. And it reminded me so much of that as well.
Oh, yeah. It makes me want to see that scene.
Yeah. And great soundtrack, of course. Amazing soundtrack to that movie as well. Good call on the Renee Russo. She's devastating in that. Okay. So, well, we have to touch on this. So you made it very clear that you can't talk about power without touching on sex. And it reminded me of this quote. It's attributed to Oscar Wilde, but some people say it wasn't actually him. But it goes, everything is about sex, except sex. Sex is about power. So curious to hear your thoughts. Why can't you talk about power without also talking about sex? And you had shared in the 4-week masterclass you did related to the book about how you learned so much about eroticism from the celibate nuns that you studied with in the monastery. And so I'm curious if you could then share, what did the celibate nuns teach you about eroticism?
First and foremost, we start by defining power, because right now, this is changing, but in most universities, when you talk like in behavioral economics or macro, you talk about power as the person who has the most toys. Those are accessories to power. Those can be taken away, right? The kind of power that can move mountains, the kind of power that does not depend on resources, Martin Luther King Jr. power, fucking Gandhi power, the kind of power we're talking about lives in the body. It's animal bodies communicating with one another. It's the difference of whether you're invisible or not. When you decide to be visible, you're visible. You get heard, you get seen, you get followed. Like, we're talking about that kind of power. Animal bodies communicating to one another. What is one of your greatest energy sources in terms of presence? Your sexual fire. Your sexual fire. When I went to China and studied with celibate nuns practicing Daoism for decades, one of the things that was astounding about them first was almost impossible to put into words. I felt like I was looking, the human female body I was looking at felt like it was the top 10% of an iceberg that went deep into the earth. Like 90% of them was in the earth. There's a famous story about the abbot who ran that convent when the communists came, the military came to tear down the monastery complex. She just stood on the edge of this plateau, looked at them, spooked them. They all turned around and ran away. That anecdote, I believe, because I was in her presence, being like, whoa, the magnitude of this human energy field is just unthinkably large. And then I realized, not only through the fact that we were doing a lot of alchemical meditations that had to do with the female hormone system, ovaries, reproductive system, I noticed that they breathed really low. What I mean by that is quite literally like from the womb. Yeah. Most, this kind of high chest breathing, that's so common for us, moves our center of gravity up, makes us easy to tip over in a martial arts sense, but also means that the energy we project is not that powerful. What happens to a woman when she starts practicing some of these lower belly breath practices, like I did, like happened to all of the women I studied with? The first thing that comes up is all the sexual trauma. Wow. And I mean, like, those of us who didn't have, concrete rapes or stories like that, repeated sexual compromises. All of us had it. 100%. Unwanted sex. All of us had it. Yeah. And the process we had to move through in order to be, this is training for celibate nuns. The thing that's why I say, you can't separate sex from power when we're talking about this kind of power, because it's like having your battery, one of your fundamental biological batteries, like 80% cut off. Yeah. So when you walk into a room, the sound of your voice, all of the things that people pick up about you, feel you, right, end up being faint. The pulse is weak. If sex is suppressed, cut off, diminished. So they go together. I mean, and it's different for men. It is just different for men. Like what does a man using his sexuality look like? Is he wearing a business suit, standing like an erect penis with an arrow pointing to his crotch? Maybe. So integrated in our perception that we don't even think about it. Yeah. Yeah. For women, it's entirely different. She can act sexy. Right. But that means that first there's a disconnect, and then there's a mimicking of what was taken away. Yeah. That's why.
If you had to try to capture what it was that made the nuns that you just described so magnetic, besides like the groundedness, like the deep belly breathing, kind of that unshakable quality, are you able to point to anything?
That energetic rootedness made them also feel like, you know how like you see in a nature documentary a panther walking, or even if you have a house cat, actually you can see it, right? There's no part of their body that's deadened or asleep, and their arms and legs are not separate. They're like one integrated individual. Their whole system is fluid, and you study pole dancing, so I'm sure that Dee Dee probably notices moments where somebody's like arm isn't in the game.
It's every single part of the body. She'll give us cues around how to accentuate it. I joke because even just like the feet, like you think pole dancing, it's like you're swinging around a pole. Half of the class is her teaching us how to like point and flex our feet at specific moments to draw attention to them. Yeah.
So the that integrated body also, for in their case, felt like an integrated way of being with their environment and the whole world. The impeccable sense of timing, of what to say when, at what volume, so clearly, not pre-thought. It's like, again, being a great jazz musician,
Yeah.
but with your entire being, like knowing when when it's time for the punchline, knowing when to pull back. Like, it's an incredible feeling. It's, you know, and again, we're coming kind of back to this idea of embodiment, because like you and I are in a situation where, because of when we were raised and where we're growing up and how, as women, we're studying how to point and flex our feet with Dee Dee in order to put the attention in the right place, because we forgot what we always knew. And what we're doing now is like the kind of, you know, there's so much information available right now. So much information. You can learn so many things. But the things that are most of value have to do with recollecting and remembering the things we always knew but forgot we knew. And like going back. It's kind of like unlearning, unknowing, getting back to that aliveness.
Yeah. This is unrelated, but someone was making a joke about the Oprah interview, how Oprah has like an avocado farm in her home. I think it was like James Corden, the comedian. He's like, you know, you've really made it when you've like gone back to becoming a farmer. Back to the basics. Okay, before we close, I have a couple really interesting group member questions that I wanted to share with you. So we have a women's group that runs every Saturday. And this is a longstanding group member. Actually, last week and then this coming week, we've been talking about good girl conditioning in anticipation of this conversation. And she lives in San Francisco. And she was sharing, it was like a beautiful sunny day, 75 degrees outside. And she was wearing a sundress and she didn't feel like wearing a bra. And she's walking down the street and this guy calls out and he says, well, someone knew what to wear today. Nice bouncy tits. And a lot of what you do at the Academy is helping women in moments when they would normally like freeze or shut down or stay quiet to have a voice. And you have a whole system for this. And so I'm curious if you can quickly share the system and then what you might have done in that situation.
Absolutely. So the public comments, you know, the walking down the street and having somebody catcall or notice you. How many of the women listening have noticed that sometimes it's really something really, really intimate, like nice bouncy tits. Sometimes it's like, hey. Or sometimes it's like nice hair, you know, something that shouldn't actually generate the degree of freak out, feeling of violation, feeling of attack. So one of the things that tends to make us feel violated is knowing in advance that we can't protect ourselves from it and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's a lie. That's our conditioning. When somebody puts their attention on us, we will tend to keep it stuck there. Mm-hmm. So that reaffirms a power dynamic of the cat caller being the dom and us being the sub.
Yeah, 100%.
At best, it's like, right? The thing that'll feel better is to, when it's safe, right? I know there are some situations where a cat caller is not a cat caller. It's like, and you know, it's not a safe situation. It's a dark alley. Like, you don't want to try this then. But if you try to flip the power dynamic by putting attention on them for a minute, you do it a few times, you start feeling in control of those interactions. And when you start feeling in control of those interactions, they don't faze you as much. And sometimes they can be an opportunity for having fun.
Right.
So the best thing to do is to question them, ask them a question, right? Why? You could put attention on them saying, yeah, nice shoes, nice comment, nice mouth. You talk to your mother with that mouth. It's the question. It's the question that you ask them that's going to move their attention on themselves, even for a split second, that's going to flip the power dynamic. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like, you know, are you a fashion critic? Are you a boob expert? You know, like, do you enjoy making women feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Like, you know, any one of those, or even the last one that I did, which was, you know, I don't remember what I said now, but ask them a question, walk and keep walking. It's going to feel like you're more in control. Because it's the being pinned.
Right.
It's the feeling of speechlessness. It's the freeze that ends up hurting us more than anything else. We don't care. We mostly don't care what people say. You know, why is it so disempowering? It's because we get stuck, and then we feel like we can't trust ourselves to defend ourselves, and then we're mad that people like that even exist.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the counter argument? Like, I'd rather just not give them any attention, like not give them the time of day. I don't want to like acknowledge their comment. What would be your response?
That's legitimate. That's a legitimate argument, except for how often does that work?
Right.
How very often, like, this dynamic is kind of fucked, because very often, not always, sometimes it's an innocent compliment, right? Sometimes it's a nice smile, like somebody's just trying to be like, but if it's nefarious, they're gonna like having silenced you and getting your goat, you know, like they might repeat, they might try even harder.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, sure. You know, you get to decide. But if you're in a place that's safe to experiment, a public street, you turn it around and ask them a question, see how it feels. You might feel very sassy, very proud of yourself. You might get a laugh. You laugh yourself.
Right. Yeah. And again, it goes back to that idea of like, once you're able to be in a state of playfulness, then it's like, I can handle whatever comes at me, right? Like, I'm not taking it so seriously.
Yeah. There was oftentimes also there's a lot of cluelessness on the other side. Like, it's difficult sometimes for the cat caller to know that they're doing something bad, something wrong. And if they're put on the spot and questioned, is this a pickup line that works for you? Like, they have a moment where they're publicly having to like question themselves.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe that didn't work so well.
Right. And even just that retort sends a message to yourself that you don't have to take them seriously, which is like half the battle.
Yes, very well said. Very well seen. Absolutely. Because it's the conversation we have with ourselves that's actually the most brutal.
Yeah. So there was another example. So this was like inside of a dance club, essentially. And there was a guy wearing sunglasses who sits down next to where one of our group members was dancing and just like enjoying time with her friends. And he just was like staring at her. And she found out later, like, he had asked if he could take a picture of her. What would be a good thing to say in that situation where you have someone who's just like looking at you in a way where you're not really able to enjoy yourself because of it?
Every single situation is absolutely unique. And every woman and every human being will feel and is capable of feeling what's up. I'm encouraging women to be able to feel those things and try techniques that bypass the conditioning that prevents us from naturally acting on that. Because what would be quite natural in that situation for many people, depending on the situation, because every situation is unique, is to go, hey, what are you staring at? Are you obsessed with me? Are you in love with me? Are you a dangerous person?
Yeah. Right.
You know, that would, it's like so, it would be so natural. Now, again, every situation is unique. Every moment is unique. Every human is unique. We know more than we think we know. There's more communication happening than we realize. If anything, I want women to trust their instincts more and more, speak their truth more and more. But saying so isn't going to make it happen. Offering experiments to try.
100%.
Yeah.
There was a final example. This one is a little bit different in that there was a group member who she had been seeing a guy, and she found out that basically everything he told her about his life and his job was a lie. And I think she was kind of in the freeze about confronting him.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to her?
Oh, well, there's, I mean, again, every situation's unique, and why things happen the way they do. Like, it's very, this is why I don't even like really commenting too much on news media stuff like Cuomo, or like, because you know, we take the humanity out of something when we generalize.
Yeah.
And it's like an easy cheat to, like, you know, say, what should she do in this situation? First of all, oftentimes, and here it's going to sound like this is why generalizations are dangerous. Maybe not her, but someone in her situation, maybe would not have gotten to that level of deceit. Maybe. If they had been trained to ask questions, put their attention out, and then question any wobbly information, any weird vibe they got.
I definitely know that she was really enjoying the ride, so to speak. I don't think he was doing it. I think he was doing it out of some insecurities. I don't think it was nefarious.
Okay. So she now wants to confront him. That's right. Is that right?
I don't think she wants to confront him, but she definitely has not done it. And she's talking about it in the group and how painful it was.
Okay. So again, because every situation's unique, and I can only go on what I'm getting from you in words, right? It's going to be important for her to create the easiest possible way for her to do this. Make it as easy for herself as possible. Even if it means writing a checklist of things he said with a box next to it going, check if true. Hand it to him or send it to him and be like, please get back to me with this. You know, like what I'm concerned about is when after women are in any way compromised, lied to, or disadvantaged, putting pressure on themselves to be phenomenal at cleaning it up.
Interesting. The invisible labor, right?
Yeah. So maybe for totally, you know, lovely, insecure, wanting to impress her reasons he lied, she wants to get the truth. What's the easiest way for her to get there? Least labor intensive. She doesn't have to show up as amazing. She doesn't have to show up as a ruthless harpy. So long as she gets either in the first interaction or in the 75th interaction exactly what it is that she needs in order to trust him and feel safe. This is like, you know, this has to be easy for her. It doesn't have to be easy for him.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And earlier in their relationship, there was some ED during their sexual experiences where he was talking constantly about how much he desired her, all the things he wanted to do with her physically, and then erectile dysfunction in the moment. And it was interesting too, because it was very hard for her to have a conversation with him about that. And now this is yet another opportunity for her to work on having these conversations.
Yeah. That's also hard. But again, like, you know, again, it's a few degrees out. It's hard to advise. One of the reasons it's important that whatever conversation she has, she doesn't deprive herself of any luxury or opportunity to make it easy, is so that her nervous system is as calm as possible, so that she can afford to have a sense of humor. If she's not trusting, if she feels violated, if she feels scared, if her nervous system, if the animal of her body's riled up, she's not going to be able to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that you mentioned the animal of our bodies, because I feel like we often forget that and discount it in these moments.
And also, you know, there's this big conversation, you know, or a current theme that's kind of new, 10 years new, 5 years new, of self-care. And we talk about self-care, it's like bubble baths and sheet masks. Fine. But fundamentally, self-care is about caring and protecting your nervous system.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's about not white knuckling and pushing yourself to trust before you do, be transparent before you feel safe, you know, be vulnerable. This whole conversation even about trust issues, I just have to learn to trust. That's bullshit. You open up and trust when you actually feel like you can trust. You can't make yourself trust someone or respect someone. Like, if you get good at caring for your nervous system, everything else follows. It's like, yeah, you know, maybe she can like have her friend devise an erectile dysfunction hilarious questionnaire for her and send it to him. Whatever it takes to make her feel like she's getting heard, but also that it's easy for her, that she's taking care of her nervous system. Also, even things like in fights, taking breaks, you know, like throughout your day when you can, you know, squeezing your boobs, doing a little dance, like nervous system, animal of the body care will do wonders for your life, sanity, and power.
Yeah, I love that definition of self-care. Thank you so much, Kasia, for your time.
Oh, thank you.
For your insights today. Do you want to take a moment to let people know where they can find you, what you're up to, again, about your book that just came out?
Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power is available at all the booksellers, all the Audibles and Amazons and all the other stuff.
You narrate the audiobook for any audio.
Yes, that was so fun. Fun. I did care for my nervous system in that vocal booth. Our website is weteachpower.com. We are about to post next semester's classes shortly.
Amazing.
We have a book event on tomorrow.
There's
a lot of stuff going on. A lot of it can be found on the website. Great. And if anyone's interested, there's a book that is 350 pages of packed information on how to get all you fucking want.
Amazing. Would you say, if there are guys tuning in, and I know there are because I've been seeing some of the comments, is it something men would learn from as well?
Yeah. I'm actually very, very, very pleasantly surprised by men's response to this work, especially in the last few months. Recently I wrote a post on the Britney Spears documentary,
which
uses the main tenets of the book, good girl conditioning, and all the stuff that's in the book made its way into the post. And one of the best experiences I've had in a long time is reading so many, not just men, but kind of like gun-toting, Trump-supporting men going, I am not into feminism, but this I can get behind. And being like,
amazing. Great. So people, I see some of your team has been linking up the website as well. Lots of great comments. Someone asked if there's a replay available. So I'm going to send Kasia's team the file. She can do whatever she wants with it. And it's available on demand in the Esther Perel Discussion Group as well on replay. So
thank you so much. This was really fun.
This was super fun. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you, Ruben, for all of your help in setting it up. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a bunch of the folks in your classes and getting the book and giving it as gifts to friends.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Bye, guys. So good to have all of you guys. Bye, everyone.